Hello, dear beloveds. Well, I'm going live because I need to talk some ideas through. I'm currently putting together the Intuitive Intelligence teacher training, and that is incredibly exciting. And if you don't know what that is for women who have completed the third level, who are now training or will be training in how to teach intuitive intelligence to the world. And the way that I have done that up to now is through the Initiate program. But these women will be able to take this content and really deliver it in whatever way they want. And so, of course, this is giving me a great opportunity to review my ideas, how I teach intuition, what I want to include and what I won't include, because of course I can't include everything, otherwise it wouldn't be a 2-day workshop that we were training them to teach. But what I wanted to share with you, I'm not going to show you this in too much detail, but this is a little brain dump that came to me, I can't remember when, a couple of months ago now, and I was putting together, what was I putting together? I was putting together something. Anyway, I needed to really get clear on some ideas around what intuition is and how I want to share it, and share it with the world. And so, you know, I draw on the research of Caroline Myss, I draw on the research of HeartMath Institute. If you know me, you'll know I describe myself as a spiritual geek, an intuition geek, because I love to understand more and more. And so I've been doing some secondary level analysis, looking at Caroline Myss's system of understanding intuition, and then looking at HeartMath's definition. They both have 3 categories of intuition. And whilst, you know, I love teaching that stuff, I wanted to go into my own understanding of how I work with it and really combine that knowledge and do some secondary level analysis, which is really just to kind of extend those ideas and to look at them in a way that serves me. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to introduce, I'm just going to imagine now we are all in class together, and I'm going to teach you some things about intuition. And I'm going to introduce 3 kinds of intuition. We have biological, communion, and surrender. And these are 3 forms of intuition, and they both have shadow and light forms. And that's something that I'm quite excited about sharing, because I think that when we come into a relationship with our intuition, we can, we can actually sit in the shadow side of intuition, and all these 3 forms that I'll introduce to you, just as much as we're in the light form. And I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. You know, one of the things that I've really worked to change is the culture around intuition in this kind of spiritual zeitgeist that we're in now, the spiritual time that we're in now, which is really about reliance on external trinkets and superstitions, and imagining that without these special conditions, a crystal grid in our workroom, or the special pendulum we always use to access, or even the idea that you're asking a question of something outside of you, these are all really dangerous ideas. This is intuition in its shadow form, because it's actually undermining what intuition truly is. And intuition is actually our highest form of intelligence. It's entirely innate, but it needs to be developed. And without commitment to training it, just as you are capable of speaking French, you're no more likely to do that than you are to develop your intuition. So this is what I want to share with you is this the 3 kinds of intuition, their shadow and their light form, and how you can work productively with each. So the first one that I mentioned is biological. So biological intuition is gut instinct. So it's very much this primitive form of intuition that is quite aligned with energetic sensitivity. And so these are this idea of energetic sensitivity is based on our biology. We're electromagnetic beings who are producing fields at the quantum level, and it doesn't matter how down to that, subatomic particle level, right up to the size of your full body, you are producing fields within fields within fields, which are interacting with the fields of everything around you, both, living and not living. Everything is producing a field, because everything is just vibrating particles. So we have this energetic sensitivity by biology, because we are moving through other people's fields, yes? And so we're picking up information through the interaction of our fields. This is biological. we can think of it in terms of a sort of, in terms of our subtle anatomy, as being that gut instinct, that primal life protects life, as Caroline Myss says, impulse. And it's usually the kind of intuition that's written about and talked about in, you know, if articles get written and popularized in the media, they're generally referencing this form of intuition. And so it's actually very, very rudimentary, basic intuition. The light form of the biological form of intuition, and let me just check my diagram because this is brand new information for me, is it is the beginning of our connection to something greater than the physical self. It's also inbuilt in the physical self. So it's, even though it's a basic form of intuition in terms of, you know, it's gut instinct, it's primal, it's about protecting life, it is actually, you know, what opens us and activates us to our more subtle forms of communication, as we'll learn about as we go along. So it's a gateway, if you like, and it's the beginning for so many people where we stop thinking of ourselves purely in terms of being solid matter, and we start thinking of ourselves in terms of being energetic. This is where the conversation about being an empath will come in, because being an empath is another way of saying of being highly sensitive, which is another way of saying being energetically sensitive, which is what we all are because it's our biology. Once again, rudimentary, very basic entry-level stuff, but it's what will often begin our conversation as, you know, as we awaken on the path, is this idea, oh, I'm highly sensitive and empathic. It's like, yes, you are. That's your biology. In the shadow side, we can find with gut instinct, and this is a really interesting kind of point, you know, when we're looking at our biological forms of intuition, is that it's so easy for us to go into what Joe Dispenza calls a body-mind state, where the body is addicted to certain emotional states because it gets the release of those stress hormones, the cortisol and the adrenaline, that we actually are living in a state of being that means that we can never clearly ascertain what our biological form of intuition is telling us. So we're sort of stuck in a cycle where we think it's our intuition, and actually it's just our body-mind addiction to creating these stress hormones that means we keep misidentifying what our intuition is. So that's the shadow side of it. So it's until we learn to break the addiction to this, you know, living in that fight or flight response, our biological form of intuition is actually very, very can be very, very off. Internal GPS is off, and we don't know that, so we keep making choices. And I wrote an article about this, and I'll share the link, which is provocatively entitled "Why Your Intuition is Wrong," because when we're in that addiction through the body-mind, we can't trust that internal GPS. That biological form of intuition is being skewed or prevented from operating properly because there is a greater program running, which is that body-mind program. And that body mind is in that state of addiction, and it can't accurately ascertain what the biology is telling us. So this is the first level. Okay, so if you're looking at my little diagram, that's the biological level. So on the one hand, the biological level in its light form is very powerful because it's the beginning of us recognizing the truth of what we are, which is more than physical matter. We start to recognize that we are energy first, physical second. On the other side, when we're in our fear state and we haven't met that fear, we actually can be very easily misguided around what it is. Sorry, my doorbell just rang. Hold on a second. Who is it? Sorry, I'm back. Sorry, getting excited. There's always some kind of glorious interruption. It wasn't the dog this time. It was lovely Kim coming to hang out. So then we move into the next level of intuition, which is beyond the biological, and we call this communion. And communion is actually, it's the merging of the biological and the non-local. So, or that pure kind of energy state. So here we're beginning to understand that we have a connection to something greater than ourselves. We've started to move beyond the gut instinct, the empath, energetic sensitivity level, and we're starting to move into a more refined understanding that we can influence matter. We can actually train our consciousness to bring us or to generate certain states of being, which will then influence the field around us, because we're fields within fields within fields, and we can actually start to change what is coming next in our life. So we can become the predictors of our future. With the communion level, we are still operating in the biological, of course, because the intention is not to transcend, but we've started to move beyond the addiction, the shadow side of it, and we're starting to be able to generate feeling states that are predicting our future, that we're cultivating for ourselves. And we're also beginning to move beyond the body, and we're starting to have that deepening communion with that one mind, that field that we're all inside of, that far greater force, the matrix that we are all part of, or the God mind, as I refer to it. We're starting to recognize that we are not just physical local beings, but we are connected to a non-local, acausal consciousness, and that we can know information not because it's a biological hit, but because we are receiving insight and wisdom and answers to our questions before we even ask the question, often through something that is acausal, non-local. So not time and space. It's not because I went to the place and saw the person and understood that was my soulmate and that's why I know that's my future, but because that knowledge entered into me non-locally and acausally, and I was beginning to understand the truth. And we bring that into the biological system. And we are still filtering through the biological form of intuition, but we are now recognizing that we can alter the biological response as much as we are receiving the biological response. I hope that makes sense. I can clarify that more. So we're looking, and I forgot to look at the comments to see if there are any questions. Karen says, is biological level also having fear? If fear is trapped in the body? Yes, that's exactly what I'm getting at. That's why it's off. So often we can't trust our intuition, because if we're only working from the biological level of our intuition, which most of us are because that's what's innate and inbuilt, and we haven't trained ourselves beyond that, we have that body-mind addiction. That means that the fear response is greater than their capacity to feel or know the next one, which is, you know, that sense of connection to our internal GPS. Okay, so communion in its life form is that we understand inherent interconnectedness. We understand that we are not acting in isolation, that we are fields within fields within fields, and we're not just aware of that, but we're actually using that information productively, acausally, non-locally, connecting to that infinite one mind. This is very exciting when we start to live like this. Caroline Myss refers to something like this as co-creative intuition. And I'm calling it communion because you're having a conversation. This is what the law of correspondence is built on. Remembering that the law of correspondence is like a communication hotline. What that infinite one mind corresponds with what I'm inviting in, and vice versa. So we're opening to partnering with God or the universe or the infinite, whatever language you want to use. And that is going beyond the physical, you know, in such a powerful way. The shadow side of this is where we try to make God our bitch. And we're like, I have a vision board and I want all the things on my vision board. And if that doesn't happen, I'm going to lose my faith in God or this intuition business, Ricky, because I have an agenda. I've turned up with my shopping list and not everything on my shopping list is being met. So we are actually then collapsing the wave function. What does that mean? So, well, let's talk about quantum physics just for a minute here. So if we turn up to the infinite with a shopping list and we say, this is what I need in order to be happy, we collapse all other potentials because we focus our attention, we place our consciousness on one option only, and we collapse everything else. Now, if that doesn't come to pass, because perhaps as we move into the next phase of intuition, you'll understand why that may not come to pass. There's a higher power at work in our life, and there's a path for us that is not going to actually be benefited by us getting everything on our shopping list, then we can go into that kind of aggression or anger with God, where our faith is conditional upon getting our ego's needs met. And we're naive. We think that I've started to see my power. I can manifest things if I place my consciousness on something, or if I hold a particular vibration for long enough. Why am I not getting everything I want all the time? Okay, so this is where we need to, in the shadow side, this is where we will be in that, that belief that we know best and we can still be looking to God as though, or that God mind as though it's our dad or Santa Claus, and we need everything to be met in accordance with our state of being, because we don't have that trust yet. But we're learning how to communicate with the God mind. We're learning how to open ourselves to that non-local acausal relationship beyond the known. And, this is an exciting progression. So in its light form, it's absolutely beautiful. It's that beginning of a true partnership, a true union with what we truly are and what the infinite is and what God is. And so it's a very beautiful phase. But so often people think this is the end phase. This is where people get really stuck and will often have a dark night of the soul, because if they don't get all their needs met according to their ego, by the way, not their higher consciousness, then they can lose faith if they think things have gone awry. I'm just checking if there's... Bree says, you're speaking to me. I've spent the last few weeks letting go of my agenda I had for God that I wasn't aware of. Yeah, it's a very powerful thing to look at what your agenda is with God. And we do this a lot in all of the programs, but in particular in the third level, because it's very easy to not recognize that you've moved into this kind of tit for tat, you do for me and I'll do for you, God, kind of relationship with your intuition. And that's really not the point, as we'll learn in the next phase. Denise says, how can we then be specific with our asking and also open to possibilities? I love that question. This is where we get into what is known as spiritual paradox, okay, my darling, where you may have an intention that you're working with, and it may feel like that intention is really congruent and really lined up, and that you're going to, use all of your tools to bring this vision into life. You wake up one day and you realize that something's a bit wrong. You no longer feel attached to that idea of your life or that business that you wanted or whatever it is. And you're like, okay, this is interesting. So I could just sit down and keep using the tools that I've got to try and sledgehammer through this feeling and just make stuff happen and blah, 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 blah. And potentially, because we are so powerful and we have free will, you could go a fair way along that road and then only get to a place where you have established something that you thought you wanted, to discover that was never the thing you wanted. Or when that feeling of discontent arises, even though you thought you were going in the direction you wanted, you get curious and you sit with it and you say, okay, I thought this was a divinely inspired idea, or I thought it was on track with what I wanted. I thought it was congruent with who I am and what I believe. But I need to sit with this discomfort and be curious, because there's a possibility that actually it isn't. And actually maybe there's something bigger waiting for me, or maybe there's just something different waiting for me. And you surrender it. You say, okay, God, or infinite consciousness, I don't know what I'm supposed to do now, but I'm willing. And I hand this over to you, and I know the next steps will come. And then the next hit of inspiration comes. And then the next hit of inspiration. And it may be a small kind of shuffle in a tweak, or it might be like burning down the building and starting again. But this is the paradox of sitting in the state between I am commanding God to be my bitch and do everything I say according to my ego's idea of what success is, versus I'm waiting for that divine inspiration to land, and then I will have the courage to act on them. And this leads us beautifully into the next phase. So thank you for that, Denise, which is surrender. Now, surrender is the final phase of intuition, and it relates to Caroline Myss's idea of visionary intuition. And in its light form, this is 100% fearless state. Whatever God is going to ask of me, and that is what it feels like when divine inspiration lands, God is asking something of you. You will not say no to God, even if it's taking your life, your business, your relationships, your home, whatever it is, in a completely different direction. You trust, because you've moved beyond this being a partnership to being absolute recognition that this is union of self with self. You have come home to the truth of what you are. Now, do not think that you're going to necessarily live there all of the time. There's a chance you'll move in and out of fear, and that's completely normal. But in this state, you're willing to use your tools to move through the fear. So you're not abandoned. You're not there sitting there going with your vision board, just going, I thought I had a vision. Your vision is upgrading. And as it's upgrading as your consciousness upgrades, and you may discover the things that you thought you wanted actually no longer really matter at all, because you're moving further and further into that state of union with the one mind. And you're surrendering all these ego ideas of what success is to you and what it was meant to look like and how many cars you were going to have or how many kids, and all of those things you start to recognize have no place here. Now, what could possibly be the shadow side of being fearless in pursuit of letting God take the lead and being in service? And that's really what this is. Well, the shadow side is where we can get unintentionally passive. and we reject responsibility. So this is where I have seen this happen, where like we assume that either everything is going to be taken care of and we don't need to take action or show up. So we become really, really apathetic, or we are taking everything as a sign of I should or I shouldn't do something. So for example, there's a woman once who was going to join third level, and I could feel that intuitively it was a profound decision for her, but it was going to take her life, and I knew this and she subconsciously knew it, in a completely different direction. And so she went to pay the initial deposit for the program, and she entered her credit card details wrong. Interesting. And when my team contacted her to let her know, she went, oh, it's a sign. God doesn't want me to do this. I was like, oh, maybe, or maybe this is just you now are sitting in such a passive state where you're assuming everything is God's will or God's actions, that when you had an opportunity to meet your fear, maybe it wasn't right for you to go ahead with the third level, but there's a good chance that maybe it was, and this was just an upper limit problem. So this is why we have to work on our intuition. This is why we have to train the muscle of our intuition, because our fear masquerades as our intuition all of the time. And at every level that I've described, biological, communion, and surrender, we are all vulnerable at all stages to the shadow side. So the shadow side is that either that absolute passivity of not doing anything and just, oh, God's going to take care of it, it's all good, or that over emphasizing everything as though God is speaking to me through everything. And this is what we kind of call spiritual narcissism, where we can actually start reading everything as though it's all about us all of the time. And actually maybe it's just because your fingers were too big to type the numbers in for your credit card on your phone. You know, we need to be willing to train the muscle of our intuition so we can discern the difference between our fear and our love. Intuition rides with love. There's the highest possible frequency that we can vibe at is love, divine love, not human love. So they're the three phases of intuition from this kind of meta level or secondary level of analysis, combining the different research that I've encountered and hopefully bringing it together in a new way that excites you and interests you and really helps you geek out as much as I do. I'll just see if there's any questions. Our fear masquerades as our intuition all the time. Absolutely. That's why we have to train it. Resistance is tricky. It can feel like a sign that we're heading in the wrong direction. But, you know, I've said so many times, this is such a great point as well, Denise, that our, you know, the upper limit problem means that we can think that we're, oh, I'm not supposed to go in that direction. But actually all that's happening is we are growing out of our comfort zone, and we get to the other side of that and we've discovered that we were actually, you know, going in the right direction. But if we retreat back into our comfort zone, we miss that growth opportunity. We miss that opportunity to take the leap into the next phase of our life. So we have to be vigilant here, and at each phase look to the shadow side and say, am I engaging in the shadow practices here, or am I in the light form of this? So thank you so much for letting me talk this through with you. I'm putting this together for the teachers who will be going forward to teach intuitive intelligence to the world, which I'm so excited about. I might also share this, or I will share this with the current initiate group, because this is definitely a beautiful complement to what you're learning in that program. But when we get to really understand the science of intuition and we stop thinking in terms of the trinkets and superstitions of the new age, we are in such a powerful position to activate intuitive intelligence, our highest form of intelligence, to guide our life. And then we are not ricocheting from one drama and crisis to the next. And we're not putting our power outside of ourselves. And we're not looking for a psychic to give us a reading to tell us the answers that we already know. We are learning how to work with everything that is innate within us productively, our fear and our love. We got all of it is working on our behalf when we know how to utilize it and access the good information at all times. You know, there's the infinite is holding us, and the information we need is available to us. We just have to understand how it all actually works and not sit in this naive kind of childlike relationship with our intuition. And I mean child in the shadow form of that, where we're just sort of being, you know, really, really passive and not recognizing that if we want to speak intuition, we got to work our intuition. And it goes with anything that you want. If you want to be masterful at it, you have to work at it. And I'm so excited to share this new information with you. Let me know what your thoughts are. I'll share the links to the Initiate program. If you're in Ireland, you can come and do it with me there in September. Otherwise, it is available online. And from October, there will be 16 women globally trained to teach this in whatever format they like. It's very exciting information. It's information the world needs to have, because intuitive intelligence is our highest form of intelligence. And everything we're trying to create will be better when we're creating from that place. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Do come and join me in Ireland if you live nearby, or even if you don't, come on a pilgrimage with me, and I'll see you all very soon.